Time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with Florence Villeminot. Great to see you.
Hey, Delano.
This week we're going to focus on a stereotype about the French, and it is, let's not beat around the bush, that the French are pessimistic. That cliché seems to have been put into question by the 2024 Olympic Games when the notoriously cynical French seemed to turn into a celebratory, fun-loving bunch. And it begs the question, are the French suddenly happy?
That's right, or was it just a parenthèse enchantée, as we say in French, an enchanted parentheses? What's certain, though, is that the Olympic Games were a rare moment of national cohesion and celebration. You were there, Delano. After all the complaining and the griping before the Games, one might say that is also typically French, the country really overcame its traditional reserve and gave in to this carnival spirit of the Games. The optimism was in the air. It even got silly. A lot of people wearing silly hats, I gotta say. Now, traditional grumpy Parisians lost their cool. They were united and happy, but after a party often comes a hangover.
It does. The hangover does come. I thought it was because the Parisians skipped town, but we have a lot of stereotype about the French that's backed up by quite a lot of data, and that is that the French are the world champions when it comes to pessimism and complaining. But is this really true?
Well, it certainly is a persistent cliché. Apparently, we're very negative. I don't know. I've never heard that before. We tend to see the glass half empty, the wine glass, of course. But this one is really backed up by stats. Year after year, poll after poll, it tends to confirm the fact that the French are indeed very pessimistic compared to other countries. And interestingly, the French themselves will admit that they are quite pessimistic.
Il n'y a pas vraiment de quoi se réjouir.
Avec les temps qu'on vit, je trouve pas qu'il faut avoir vraiment le moral avec la violence, tout.
La violence.
Le pouvoir d'achat, le chômage, il faut reconnaître que c'est pas évident.
Le chômage, les jeunes.
Avec tout ce qui se passe dans le monde et même chez nous, il y a un ras-le-bol.
Tous les indicateurs sont mauvais. Les choses s'améliorent pas, je crois.
Now, Flo, one of the women in that clip used a key word that sums up French pessimism, ras-le-bol.
It's our expression du jour. Ras-le-bol literally means at the very edge of the bowl, about to overflow. It means essentially to be fed up. You've had it up to here, is what you might say in English. So what are the French so gloomy about? Well, there's some timeless classics like death and taxes, of course, but the main source of French pessimism is the future of the country. As you can see it here, in this poll, this 2023 poll, 70% of French people say they feel pessimistic about the future of France. Now, it must be said that recent months, for instance, have been marked by political instability and not to mention years of inflation as well.
Les Français n'ont pas encore retrouvé le moral qu'ils avaient avant la poussée inflationniste. Ça a laissé des traces, ça a fortement marqué les esprits, notamment parce que ça a touché des postes budgétaires tels que l'alimentation.
Purchasing power, unemployment, retirement, rising inequalities, also climate change. All this has really shaken people's confidence.
Now, some argue, Flo, that the French are more pessimistic than they should be, given the high standard of living here.
That's right. France has a lot going for it, Delano. It's one of the richest countries in the world, one of the safest countries in the world. We have a really good social safety net that covers a lot of things, healthcare being a big one we talk a lot about. It's been said that France is a paradise that's inhabited by people who think they live in hell. But some say this actually tends to be a first world problem.
Des pays plus pauvres, finalement, on peut se dire que demain sera meilleur. Alors que quand on est dans un pays occidental, où finalement on a un train de vie plus confortable relativement par rapport aux autres, on se dit que demain sera plutôt moins bon, et c'est plutôt ce que portent comme discours les hommes politiques.
Now, Flo, some would say that this pessimism isn't just a Western phenomenon because it's deeply anchored in French culture and history. Why is that?
Well, there are many theories here. Some say it's because of the education system here in France, which is seen as harsh, somewhat crushing people's self-confidence. There's also the relationship to work, which is quite particular. People tend to see work as a constraint. But some go even further and say that this pessimism is just part of our DNA. It's been handed down generation after generation. We're very critical people. It comes to us from Descartes, from Voltaire, and most recently from the existentialists. But it must be said this bleak outlook can have some quite serious consequences. France has Europe's highest rate of the usage of antidepressants, for instance, and one of Europe's highest number of suicides. But it must be said also that France has one of Europe's highest fertility rates and the number of children. So the outlook on the future isn't all bleak.
It is not bleak, hope, thankfully. Thank you very much for that, Flo. That's all we have time for. If you have more questions about France or life in France, don't hesitate to reach out to Flo on X. The address is @FloVilmino, and check out our website for previous shows.